Morning, welcome to House Judiciary. Just a few comments. We've heard quite a bit of testimony already on House Bill 34. If folks have new information, things we haven't heard yet, really look forward to hearing that. But we have 3 bills that we want to finish today. So if we can stay on point on the topic and help us reach a good decision, I think that would be useful. So Debbie, why don't we start by calling the roll?
Representative Craigo.
Here.
Representative Chestick. Here. Representative Harrelson.
Here.
Representative Jennings. Representative Nemec.
Here.
Representative Oakley.
Here.
Representative Provenza.
Here.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Here.
And Chairman Waschit.
Here. So we're going to resume public testimony on House Bill 34 or Senate File 34 on unmanned drone aircraft. When you come up to speak, press the button until the little green light comes on. Introduce yourself. If you're representing an agency or an organization, tell us what organization or agency that is. If you're representing yourself, please tell us where in this great state you reside, and then briefly tell us what we need to hear. We also have several witnesses waiting to testify in the Zoom world. Just raise your hand when we start taking those messages over the internet, over the Zoom, and our staff will queue you up and start bringing folks in. So we'll begin with witnesses in the room. Is there anyone in the room wishing to testify? Please step forward, sir.
Check. Okay, that's working. All right, Mr. Chairman and committee members, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Matt Pinataro. I live in Laramie County, and I'm self-employed as a freelance videographer. My background is relevant to my testimony. I retired from the Air Force in 2019 after 24 years of service as a security forces officer. I have a master's degree in unmanned systems from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University, where my thesis was a case study on public safety and successful first responder drone programs. I've been flying drones professionally since deploying to Afghanistan in 2009 and stayed fully engaged with the military small UAS community as one of the Air Force's subject matter experts for the remainder of my career. Just prior to my retirement, I was stationed at F.E. Warren. I oversaw counter UAS testing, training, equipment fielding, and policy to protect the nation's ICBM fleet, including the 19 launch facilities here in Wyoming. I have well over 1,000 flight hours on drones of all shapes and sizes. Today, I still fly drones for both business and pleasure. So regarding the aerial trespass bill, I do not support it as currently written. I would urge the committee to draft a bill that is less ambiguous, does not interfere with legitimate official and commercial flight operations, and is more easily enforceable. Additionally, the committee should consider whether the behavior the bill seeks to curb isn't already covered under other Wyoming statutes, such as 62506, the stalking statute. However, rather than just poke holes in the bill, I'd rather offer some suggestions for improvement and moving forward. So the first of those is quantify and define what substantial interference with a landowner's enjoyment of their land is, so that law enforcement officers can accurately determine if a violation occurred. The second, add some sort of mental culpability standard to the bill. Perhaps a person is guilty of trespass by small unmanned aircraft if the person intentionally causes. This would prevent criminally charging someone whose drone or RC airplane got away from them due to wind or something and flew over the neighbor's fence. Third, add the list of first responder and official exemptions from the prohibiting drones over penal institutions bill contained in Senate File 32. Without these exemptions and a clarification of what substantial interference with enjoyment is, this bill would criminalize all official state, local, federal, and emergency response drone operations. Fourth, add language protecting legitimate commercial operations conducted by current holders of FAA remote pilot licenses. This is the license that all commercial drone pilots are required to have by 14 CFR Part 107 to have on their person at all times while flying for commercial purposes. Possession of this license, coupled with the totality of the circumstances, would be an excellent litmus test for law enforcement to determine criminal intent. Lastly, the elephant in the room, which pertains to clearly defining the nebulous standard of immediate reaches of airspace. I'd urge the committee to conduct further research into federal preemption laws which attempt to restrict airspace under 49 USC 40103, sovereignty and use of airspace. Perhaps involve the Wyoming Aeronautics Commission to help craft a bill that balances Wyoming landowner desires with federal aviation regulations. Mr. Chairman, I thank you and the committee members for your time and allowing me to speak.
Thank you for your service to our country and your excellent testimony this morning. I found it enlightening. One quick question for you, sir. Do these drones have any identifying markings on them, like tail numbers that we see on other commercial aircraft?
So all drones are required by federal aviation regulations to have an identifying number visible on the exterior of the hull.
Thank you. Other questions for our witness? Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Thank you, sir, for being here. I appreciate your testimony. Just curious if you know of any existing law that protects critical infrastructure flying drones over.
I can only speak in the context of my former life as a security forces officer. There is the all the launch facilities and the Air Force bases and a variety of other things are protected by what is called national defense airspace, which is why if you drive by F.E. Warren, you see the no drone zone signs. That's the citation for that. So that was a special carve out created by the FAA to protect those and give the military some authorities when it came to our counter UAS capabilities.
Thank you, sir. Just something I didn't mention at the start is all your comments need to come through the chair. Okay, so direct them to me and then respond to questions from the.
Okay, thank you, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Thomas Gleason. I live in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and I'm here representing myself and my business Nexus Solutions LLC. And I hope to be able to shed some light on some of the questions that have come up, as well as provide some pre-existing Supreme Court cases and legislation that's already in effect through the federal government specifically. So just a little bit of background. I'm a drone pilot and have held my Part 107 remote pilot certificate issued by the FAA for commercial unmanned aerial vehicle operations, also known as UAV, for the past 5 years. During that time, my area of focus has been electric utility inspections. I'm here formally voicing my opposition to the proposed bill for the following reasons. Also, you should have the handout in front of you, SF0034, trespass by small unmanned aircraft concerns. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read every single line. I'm going to just touch on it. So number one, the lack of defined parameters in this bill. As many other folks have said, I think it is way too vague. And in addition, this bill could be viewed as preempted because Congress intended the FAA to use airspace to integrate drones, and the FAA picked 0 to 400 foot above ground level for non-recreational flyers. And as you can see, I also included an appendix that if this was in an electronic form, you could reference these articles online. I'm going to also point you to review Singer versus Newton. The city of Newton passed an ordinance which regulated the flight of unmanned aircraft. The long and the short of that is that they had to repeal these laws because they were found to be by the courts preempted. In addition to that, there's been a lot of talk about the 500 foot level. It's a very vague area, but essentially the FAA rules apply to the entire national airspace system. There is no such thing as unregulated airspace. Since the FAA dictated 0 to 400 foot, they do control that airspace, or they at least can create legislation to control it and what happens there. In addition, SF0034 conflicts with 49 USC 40103 sovereign use of airspace. A citizen of the United States has public right to transit through the navigable airspace. And as you know, like I said, I'll leave some of this other stuff to you to look into. Once again, the wording is way too vague. Anyone at any time could say, oh, this is bothering me. This is, immediate reaches of airspace, and the phrase entry substantially interferes with the landowner's or his authorized occupants' use and enjoyment of the land. It needs to be much more specific because someone could intentionally bother the landowner and not even realize it. Personally, my interactions with the public stem from their curiosity, and I happily interact with them as long as I feel I will not jeopardize their safety or the safety of my operation. I have had a few instances where landowners were not happy because I normally ask my clients to inform them ahead of time. Sometimes there's a miscommunication and they can approach me, they ask me to leave, and I happily do so. I'm not here to upset anyone. I'm a professional. I'm here to conduct myself in a professional manner. We also have the 2018 Wyoming Statute Title 10 Aeronautics Chapter 4 Uniform State Law. The lower dangerous flight, landing on water, landing on landing on land or water of another. I outlined that further down. There was also a gentleman that testified on Wednesday that he had a drone invade his privacy and he felt that it was looking in his living room. So the FAA will be implementing remote ID on September 16th of this year. Remote ID will provide information about drones in flight, such as identity, location, and altitude of the drone and its control station or takeoff location. Authorized individuals from public safety organizations may request the identity of the drone's owner from the FAA. All drones, and once again, this is all cited on the FAA's websites. All drone pilots are required to register, including those who fly for fun, for business, or for public safety, and they must operate their drone in accordance with the final rule, meaning of remote ID. I'd like to shed a little bit more light on 2 points that seem to be in contention. Once again, the 500-foot reference is repeated, and it's from Title 14, Chapter 1, Subchapter F, et cetera, minimum safe altitudes, the general section. Except when necessary for takeoff or landing, no person may operate an aircraft below the following altitudes. And under Part C, over other than congested areas, an altitude of 500 feet above the surface, except over open water or sparsely populated areas. In those cases, the aircraft may not be operated closer than 500 foot to any person, vessel, vehicle, or structure. So that's stated under Part 91. My operations as a commercial UAV pilot are conducted under Part 107, which allow me to operate my UAV from 0 to 400 foot. In addition to that, immediate reaches of airspace, Congress gave power, and once again, I'll restate what I said earlier. Congress gave power to the FAA to make the plans and policy for use of the navigable airspace. The FAA created 14 CFR Part 107, which establishes the rules and regulations for small unmanned aircraft systems, stating they may be used from 0 to 400 foot. I'd also like to touch on the amendment real quick. I had the opportunity to review the proposed amendment, and in its current state, I cannot support it. The reason is for the use of the term license. I'm a commercial drone pilot and I do not hold a license, I hold a certificate. So that would have to be changed. And my final point is that I'd like to take a moment to address a comment by a senator of the Senate Judiciary Committee that, quote, "A shotgun is a good way to deal with annoying drones." Please refer to the article in the Cowboy State Daily published on January 18th, 2023, titled, and I didn't want to call anyone out by name. So, well, many members of the public enjoy making this comment in jest or in a serious manner. It is nothing new to me. However, I think both that senator and the public should be aware of the FAA's stance on this. 18 U.S. Code 32, destruction of aircraft or aircraft facilities, Part 3, set fire to, damages, destroys, or disables any air navigation facility or interferes by force or violence with the operation of such facility as well. And they're also referring to aircraft themselves, and aircraft drones are classified in aircraft. There's a Supreme Court that I mentioned earlier, a Supreme Court case that I cited earlier that shows that drones are an aircraft. If such fire damaging, destroying, or disabling or interfering is likely to endanger the safety of any such aircraft, that person shall be fined under this title or imprisoned for not more than 20 years or both. So, like, as I said, if you had this in electronic form, you could read the entire case. That is all I have. I'm ready for questions, if there are any.
Thank you, Mr. Gleason. Any questions, Mr. Gleason? Thank you for your testimony. Very informative.
Thank you.
We had one more witness in the room. Did anybody else in the room want to testify? Don't see anybody. Zoom world. Who's first up? Here. RJ Pieper. Bring Mr. Pieper in, or Ms. Pieper. We'll find out who RJ is in a moment. Good morning, Mr. Pieper. We just have been hearing quite a bit of testimony. We're asking our witnesses this morning to be brief and to the point. So state your name for the record and where you live in Wyoming, and then tell us what we need to know.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Can you hear me all right this morning?
Yes.
My name is RJ Pieper. I own New Studio Photography and Framing in Rock Springs, Wyoming. I am an independent photographer. I am also the vice president of the Wyoming Professional Photographers Association. We represent a group of photographers who are our members from not only in Wyoming, but from neighboring states. We even have members all the way out in Maryland who are like me, small, independent, one-man operations here. And I come to you today opposed to this bill, vehemently opposed to this bill, because frankly, it has zero allowance for commercial operations. The amendment might work. I'm still not a fan of the ambiguity of it, as other people have said. But let me put this into context for you. About 15 to 20% of my revenue in this business is derived from a drone. And if I can't do my job, that's 15 to 20% of revenue that I don't get, and likely this business couldn't survive. We've been here 104 years. And so 15 to 20% of our revenue is big. You know, I emailed the committee, I think Wednesday, and there's a whole PDF I attached to that that has about almost a dozen of my most recent flights as a real estate photographer here in Rock Springs and Green River. And I showed the property I was working at and then where the flights went around it. And it's dang near impossible to get what I need for my clients without flying over another piece of private property. It just isn't really possible. And you know, there's been some talk of altitudes. My altitude is usually 50 to 200 feet. So even in its previous iteration, where you guys were talking about putting a lower limit on altitude, would still prevent me from doing anything that I could give to my clients. So I would respectfully ask that this bill be scrapped and maybe do as other states have and put in a peeping Tom law instead. You know, regulate the act, not the presence, not the object. My heart goes out to Mr. Winnie and Mr. Summers, Representative Summers, excuse me. I can't imagine how that violation of privacy must feel. But I feel like that's a bad apple spoiling the rest of the bunch. And and when my livelihood's at stake, it hurts. So I'd stand to questions.
Representative Craigle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I guess that's my question for all of the drone pilots, and I'm just going to start asking it. When do the individual people of Wyoming have a right to privacy? I mean, that's what we're really talking about here. So I understand you're worried about your ability to make a living. We're up here worried about people's right to privacy, and we got to balance those rights. So if somebody could come up with a good solution for us, I'm sure we'd listen, but just saying I can fly my drone wherever I want isn't necessarily the right answer. So do you have a proposal?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the good representative's question. And that's why I said, you know, something like a peeping Tom law. Michigan has done it, New Mexico has done it. And in the email I sent you guys on Wednesday, there's text in that, and then there's also a link that has all of the kind of drone laws that other states have passed that basically are saying, you know, you can't spy on people with a drone. And here's the thing that I think people need to understand, is that even though the drone might be in front, you know, near your house, it's not looking at your house necessarily. You know, the cameras can tilt and things like that. So the perception that they're being spied on might not be real, or it might be there, but it might not actually be happening, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Mr. Pieper. I guess if that drone is hovering over my daughter while she's at the swimming pool, whether the camera is pointed at her or not, I'm going to find that a disturbing circumstance, and that's what we're trying to get at here. So thank you for your testimony this morning, Mr. Pieper.
Thank you.
Representative Chesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Pieper, thank you for your testimony. There are some guardrails built into this. I'm wondering, I want to hear your views on whether they're sufficient or not. The main one that I see is that you're only guilty of an offense if the entry, quote, substantially interferes with a landowner's or his authorized occupant's use. I know it's a vague standard, but maybe it's appropriately vague, or how do you view the language? Does that give you enough protection that if you're flying over doing your work, are you substantially interfering? You wouldn't be guilty if you were not substantially interfering. What's your view on that language?
Mr. Pieper.
Mr. Chairman, Representative, I appreciate that question, and you're right. I feel that language is far too ambiguous, because what I would perceive as being reasonable enjoyment and what somebody else could be perceiving as reasonable enjoyment could be two very different things. I was performing a job in Green River last summer near the bowling alley, and I was flying. I wasn't even over the person's house, but the lady came out, and I do, like other operators, have a lot of people who are just curious, and if I see people outside, I'll let them know, and I actually go so far as to call Sweetwater County Dispatch to let them know that there's a commercial operation going on. But in this instance, I had a lady come out, and she came out, and she was immediately just angry. She says, you're and excuse me for the language, you're pissing off my dogs. And I said, oh, I'm sorry, I'm completing a commercial drone operation. I'll be finished in just a few minutes. And she says, well, you better get it on the ground now, or I'm going to turn them loose on you, and you're not going to like that. So, like, I wasn't even over her property, and her dogs were barking a little bit, and she was unreasonably upset. So the tolerance for certain people might be here and here. I think it's just a matter of personality, really, and perception.
Thank you. Can we bring Mr. Richard in, please? Scott Richard.
Thank you, Ben.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me this morning?
I can. Please state your name for the record and where you're at, and tell us what we need to know briefly.
Yes, sir. So my name is Scott Richard. I'm the president of Wyoming Realtors, and I am concerned with the way the bill is written. To keep it brief, as you suggested, I can support the concept of what Ms. Wilkinson proposed last Wednesday. And again, I want to reference what everybody else is saying, that as a commercial pilot using it for those purposes and carrying a Part 107 license, the people that this bill could unintended, or let me rephrase that, could affect unintentionally is what I think most everybody is concerned with. To answer some questions earlier, maybe you put a height limit of 100 feet in that. Again, as a Part 107 licensed or certificate pilot, you're not supposed to exceed 400 feet. Keep in mind too, though, that much like a telephoto lens on a camera, more drones are having that capability of zooming in. They don't necessarily have to be over your property. They could be over their own property and zoom in all the way across multiple areas. The reason I'm concerned with this for my industry and what we do is we use drones for aerial shots and photography for communities and neighborhoods. If we do that and unintentionally fly over somebody's house or at a certain level, 350 feet, give or take, and you're flying over a community to establish a shot, where does that put us? We won't be capable of doing that. And for those that use it for commercial purposes, our work has even been picked up by the Discovery Channel and aired on national television. So again, the way the bill is written, it puts us in jeopardy of the way this bill is written to be in trouble for this. And the people that are here testifying on behalf of that aren't the ones that are causing the problem. It's hobbyists that are learning to fly and flying into neighbors' backyards. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Anybody have questions for Mr. Richard this morning? Thank you very much. And we now to Chris Leatherman. Mr. Leatherman?
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me all right? Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? Dang it. Oh, if you can hear me all right, I'm having some technical issues. Sorry, I apologize for that. So if you can hear me, I'll go ahead and give my brief testimony. My name is Chris Leatherman. I am the owner of Aerial Solutions of Wyoming, an unmanned aircraft business, educational business in Gillette. I'm speaking today in opposition to the bill on 4 points. Point 1, the language of the proposed bill is vague. What is the immediate reaches of the airspace over private property? What does it mean to interfere with the landowner's use and enjoyment of their land? If a law exists that may deprive a person of their freedom and property, it needs to be exact. Every paragraph, every sentence, every word, and every letter counts. The language of the proposed bill is not precise. Point 2, applications used to control unmanned aircraft do not display private property boundaries. This makes it impossible for a pilot to know if their aircraft is over private property while in flight. Point 3, the federal government through the FAA is the sole authority of the national airspace. In 1946, the Supreme Court ruled the principle of land ownership, starting at the ground and extending to the periphery of the universe, had no place in the modern world in the case of the United States v. Cosby. Congress had declared the national airspace as a public highway. If this were not the case, travel by flight would be impossible. Every person on an aircraft could be accused of trespass. To quote the court at the time, common sense revolts at the idea. In the 2017 case of Singer v. the City of Newton, the United States District Court ruled the city's ordinance on unmanned aircraft flights below 400 feet impedes the federal government's objectives in integrating unmanned aircraft into the national airspace, meaning this ordinance was preempted by federal regulations. Point 4, the proposed bill opens the state of Wyoming to lawsuits. I've been in regular correspondence with Jonathan Rupert, an attorney, commercial pilot, and unmanned aircraft operator. He is well versed in aviation laws and regulations, and is one of the attorneys who worked in the Singer case. To quote Jonathan from our latest email regarding this bill, just tell them, meaning the state, I would like the opportunity to sue them. Should this bill become law, other attorneys and organizations may see it as an opportunity to take the state to court. This exposes the state of Wyoming to the cost of defending the law, costs that will fall on the Wyoming taxpayer. I ask the committee to vote down the bill. Thank you. Sorry, I seem to be having technical issues and can't hear you. Try something here.
No one on Zoom can hear me.
That's what they're saying. That's what I'm.
Any idea what the problem might be or?
Yeah.
Oh, can anybody hear me now? How about Miss Urbicite? Can you bring her in? Is she still out there? She's not. Grossman, Ally Grossman? Is there anybody left out there? Yeah, this is why some chairmen do not allow Zoom participation in their committee meetings.
Yep.
Grossman? Ally Grossman, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
That's wonderful, terrific. So we've heard lots of testimony already about vagueness and FAA regulations and federal preemption and necessity of various industries. Do you have something different to tell us this morning? And if so, could you tell us briefly?
I believe I do. And and thank you, Chairman Washut and members of the committee. I am a Laramie-based video producer who is studying for my FAA Part 107 license. For me, I did send you an email, so I'll try to skip through it on what has not been addressed this morning. For me, the bill is problematic and I am opposed to it. Wyoming tourism is such a vital part of our economy, and our vistas would not be possible to shoot unless we were to fly over some private land space. Already there are restrictions in place. We are not allowed to fly over wildlife areas or military areas, and our maps do not tell us what is private or public land for the most part. In residential and populated areas, such as my neighborhood, I'm practicing right now. I've been a professional for over 20 years. And so I am just now entering the drone industry. I would not be able to practice in my front yard because houses are approximately 200 feet away from where I would be practicing, and I need to take off and land somewhere. Others have mentioned that we are not allowed to fly above 400 feet. So that is also problematic to me. There is something called sustained versus transitional paths, and I want everybody to be aware of that. So if I am going to shoot and I need to fly, I need a path to, I need an easement, I need a path to cross. And so I would like for that to be kept in mind as well, that there's a difference between hovering over somebody's property and going through airspace. So really, truly, I'm here because professional aerial photography and video services have a great impact on the economic vitality of Wyoming. And the bill, if passed as it stands, would have serious and significant negative impact on Wyoming's economy and Wyoming's valued visual professionals who have invested in licensure, such as I am. And with that, I am concerned that if this bill passes, I could lose work and time. I could be jailed for trespassing when truly I'm just trying to add to the economy of the state. With that, I'll take any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Ms. Grossman. Questions for Ms. Grossman? Appreciate you being here this morning.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else raised hands? Dave Adsit.
Mr. Chairman, can you hear me?
I can, Mr. Adsit. Mr. Adsit, we've heard lots of testimony about FAA regulations and vagueness and altitudes and industrial necessity. Do you have something new and different to share with us?
Absolutely. That's why I'm testifying today. I'm located in Gillette, Wyoming, presently out of state testifying. I am a certified Part 107 pilot as well as a manned aircraft pilot. I did send you, each of the committee members, an email with concerns and potential solutions. What I'd like to talk about today is an unintended consequences, and mainly related to my expertise. I spent 39 plus years with the Gillette Police Department. The last 18 years of my employment were doing computer forensics and computer crime investigations. What I haven't heard through all these hearings is the financial aspect that this bill is going to create to the criminal justice and law enforcement community. What you need to understand is there's a concept in law called best evidence. The best evidence for these cases is going to be on the drone and or on the memory cards in those drones, as well as the laptops or the controllers for the drones. There obviously is going to be innumerable boundary issues. The only way that you're going to be able to really get a solidified boundary or a trespass case is to prove that they were actually on the property. That best evidence is going to be on that drone or that media. In order to extract that media, it's going to have to be done in a forensic manner. And it's going to have to be copied and then examined and given to experts who can map that data to produce a result. That's not a simple matter of just a law enforcement officer grabbing the drone and going to hook it up to any computer of his choice and trying to download the data and figure out what happened. So what that's going to require is specific, what I will refer to as a lab, forensic lab, like we had in Gillette, in order to do that type of examination and acquisition. In terms of other consequences, in order to do that acquisition, the law enforcement officer will have to go to the county attorney's office. They will have to craft a warrant in order to hold or seize that drone and the associated computer equipment, and then craft a warrant to search that data or equipment for the appropriate data. I don't know if anybody's consulted DCI, but this could result in mission creep on DCI's mission, as well as additional cost involved to train people to do that, to buy equipment in order to do that. Local jurisdictions will also have to train people and buy additional equipment and train them in order to accomplish this mission, in order for these cases to actually fly in court. The other thing that concerns me about this is I've heard a couple of times mentioned that we should just pass this bill and then see what happens. I really don't see how that's the Wyoming way of doing things. California, New York, perhaps, but not Wyoming. Let's craft a bill that's going to work and do it right the first time. Open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Adsett. Any questions, Mr. Adsett? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony this morning. Anybody else, or can we wrap up public testimony, PR? Travis Myers. Mr. Myers, are you out there? Mr. Myers?
Hello, this is Travis Meyer.
Mr. Myers, thank you for joining us this morning. We've heard lots and lots of testimony on this bill. I hope you've been listening. Do you have anything new and different to tell us?
Actually, it was not my intention to testify. I am a commercial drone pilot, and I was just listening in to see where things are going. I support everything that all of the other drone pilots have said.
That's what I call brief testimony. Very much appreciated.
You
Anybody
bet.
out there wish you to testify. Thank you, Mr. Myers. No one else? Who? Vic Motz?
Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Motz, we've heard lots of testimony already about vagueness in the bill, FAA regulations, federal preemption, necessity of businesses. So I'm just asking if you have anything new and different to tell the committee that we haven't already heard.
Just a little bit as well, but I do want to reiterate a few things and basically offer myself for any questions that may have. Just a brief background about myself. I am not a Wyoming resident. I live in Denver, but I do work in Wyoming. I have clients up there that I do work with. And I'm also, the reason I want to present myself as somebody to answer questions, I am on the FAA safety team as a drone pro for the Colorado and Wyoming region. And basically what that means is if somebody's turned into the FAA and the FAA FSDO, which is Flight Standards District Office here in Colorado, decides they just need a little bit of education, I'm one of 4 in the region that they call. So I will talk to your folks in Wyoming, and likely if they get called or if they get turned in for something like that. I've also been a drone pilot since 2013. I do need to say, though, that as a volunteer with the FAA, I do not have permission to speak on behalf of the FAA. So I want to make sure that's out there. Plenty of people have reached out and said something about the vagueness of the rules. I get that. The only thing I like to add to that is if these people who work with the rules every day, including y'all, thank you very much for providing this, are confused about this, what's going to happen when a law enforcement officer comes on scene. Odds are he's going to say, or she is going to say, here's the citation. I'm going to let the prosecutor and judge figure this out. And honestly, I don't blame them. I've actually worked with police departments here in Denver, training on this very subject. And it's not fair to them to really put this in their lap. They've got enough to worry about already, and they don't need to worry about the vagueness and the minutia of what this bill will present to them. I do want to address one concern I had with the testimony from Wednesday for Mr. Janeska. As you may remember, he is the director of KCPR, Casper Airport. He mentioned that the FAA looks for the local entities to control certain aspects. And while that may be true of the navigational impediments, it's not in the case of UAS incursions. What the FAA asked locals to do is gather information, and there is there are guidelines put out called the Law Enforcement Assistance Program, and I'd be more than happy to hook anybody up in this panel with our current LEAP officer, LEAP agent. But they asked them, you guys need to do this and then give it to us, and we'll make the decision from there. There is very specific language about where we can fly our drones in controlled airspace. And also it's illegal for us to interfere with manned aircraft. So if you want to get the FAA involved in a real big hurry, you're in an airport and you call them, say, look, we got people flying in our approaches. They'll jump all over that real fast. They will not show up in the event, obviously, because they're not there, but neither will law enforcement, to be quite honest. By the time they get there, the drone's gone. There's been the mention of the 500-foot level, which is inaccurate, which I get. I understand that. It's a great example of if it's on the internet, it must be true. That is wrong. We do have, basically we have the public right of transit for the navigable airspace, and drones do fly in navigable airspace. And the best way I can illustrate the fact that people are wrong when they say that below 500 feet is not controlled by the FAA is you can buy or build a small little gyrocopter in your backyard and fly it yourself. Try flying that all over the city and stay below 500 feet and think the FAA won't show up at your door. So in addition to your neighbors and the police department trying to beat down your front door, the FAA will be right there with them. I can promise you that. Remote ID was mentioned. It will come into effect in any registered aircraft in the NAS, so the NAS, National Airspace System, must transmit remote ID. And that will be as of September 16th of this year. 4 of the 10 drones I fly are already registered. And I also want to mention that it was very disturbing to hear the comment from your Senate colleague in the chamber where he publicly suggested shooting down drones. I've dealt with people who've had their drones shot down. Not only is it illegal, as mentioned, but it's a horrible idea. Our drones are powered by lithium polymer batteries, LiPo batteries. And if you fracture a LiPo battery, you're pretty much going to have an instantaneous self-fulfilling fire. And if you don't believe me on that, go to YouTube and look up LiPo fire, or read about a gentleman who shot down a sheriff's drone in Florida last year. When the cops did show up to his house, they had two things to do. One, they had to arrest the guy because he was a felon with a gun. And two, they had to put the fire out on top of his shed. Luckily, the drone landed on his shed on fire because he shot at it and hit the battery and it caught fire. He was also earlier this year was indicted by a federal grand jury under 18 USC 32. So with that, I'm open to questions. And again, appreciate the ability to do this remotely since I live in Denver and actually have to go fly out at the airport this afternoon.
Representative Shestak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try and be brief, but I think this is an important point. Mr. Meyer, you are familiar with FAA regulations, obviously because of your job. Understanding of the FAA regulations is that the general rule is 500 feet, but there's exceptions for congested areas or sparsely populated areas. And the sparsely populated area, you can go below 500 feet. Is that a correct understanding of the regulation?
That's for manned aircraft. That's for traditional aircraft. Drones fly under 107, not 91 or 61.
Okay. So for a manned aircraft can go as low as it wants in a sparsely, so the crop dusters are not violating.
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Right. Yeah. So, does that suggest that the, FAA rules would preempt this statute?
100%.
If we were,
There's court cases. Yeah, there's court cases to prove it, including Singer v. Newton, Mass, which I was one of the witnesses for Dr. Singer in that case.
so in a sparsely populated area, this statute that we're contemplating would not have any effect. It would be preempted by FAA rules.
It would in any area because we don't fly under the 500-foot rule because that is for manned aircraft. We fly under Part 107, which is unmanned.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Do we have anybody left? One more. Thank you. Your name, sir?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My name is Scott Stoffman. I work closely with Mr. Moss in his work nationally. I represent the Association for Uncrewed Vehicle Systems International, or AUVSI. Like Mr. Moss, I am also a Part 107 certificated pilot and an FAA Safety Team Drone Pro. I do not wish to waste the committee's time, but I wanted to hold out our membership and our knowledge. We advocate across the 50 states through a new program called Drone Prepared, setting up model legislation on the best ways for states to be ready to embrace this new technology and the benefits of drones. I just wanted to hit on the 4 pillars of Drone Prepared. Basically, number 1, look for opportunities to promote drone use for public benefit. Number 2, leave air navigation and aviation safety to the FAA. Number 3, leverage existing laws. And number 4, use caution when adopting drone-specific laws. I'm happy to send along materials along those lines, but I just wanted to reiterate that we do not like the legislation the way that it has been authored. I'm open to questions, but I think that anything that I would have said already has been covered beyond this. Thank you very much.
Thank you for joining us this morning. With that, I'll close public comment. Public comment is closed. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Representative Craigle moves the bill. Do we have a second? Second by Representative Oakley. Discussion on the bill. Representative Craigle.
Mr. Chairman, I got a couple of minutes.
Before we take up a lot of time on amendments, I kind of want to get a sense of the committee. Are we open to moving this bill if amended? Or are the amendments not going to change your mind? I guess it's hard to say when you haven't seen the amendments yet, but I do worry that we may spend quite a bit of time on amendments and then still not have anything that we want to move forward. Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've been trying to look for ways to amend this in a way that I think we would feel comfortable with and other folks would. And I think it would be incredibly difficult to move it out of kind of this trespass issue to the action, which I think is what a lot of people would be more comfortable with. So I'm not sure. I haven't found a way to amend it to do that. So I don't know that, and I don't know if we can. And certainly we can't do it once this bill leaves committee. So that's just my thoughts on it. I think we're just we might have to come back at this next year, unfortunately.
Representative Chesky.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with my colleague on the other side of the dais here. That this is, I know it was an interim bill from last year. I understand it was worked over the summer. I still don't think it's ready for prime time. I think there's just way too many questions about this. We may have to take another run at it. I also have, I saw the one proposed amendment that was handed out, which improves the bill, but still doesn't get me over to saying we ought to do it. I think there's the preemption question we just came up with. I need to study that some more. I'm very concerned about the bill, and I'm personally not ready to vote for it. I would prefer to study it some more.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I agree with both colleagues that just spoke.
Anyone else? Representative Oakley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'd like to propose the amendments.
Go ahead and let's move the amendment. Let's hear what you have to say. Representative Craig.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So line 12, page 1. I'm gonna add a clause at the beginning of the sentence. So before a person, I wanted to say, unless the small unmanned aircraft is being used for a valid commercial or governmental purpose, comma. Line 14. Take out the words the immediate reaches of. And I'll explain what I'm doing when we get done. Line 15, after the word landowner, put a period. And then insert the language and the entry and the entry substantially interferes with the landowner's or his authorized occupants' use and enjoyment of the land, period. Strike that onto page 2. The rest remains the same.
Or a second to the amendment? Second by Oakley. Discussion on the amendment. Representative Craig.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So we heard lots of testimony about we need to do a carve out for government and commercial. So that's what the initial clause does. So if you're doing filming, if you're doing GIS, government stuff, you wouldn't be subject to this. This is to try to get to the private operators that I think the intent of the bill was for. Then the rest of the language I took out was to get rid of the vagueness, which by the way, we put in to protect people. That was the whole purpose of that language, was so that it has to be it has to be intentional, right? That was the idea, so that it's very hard for law enforcement to prove this case. We wanted to put that burden on law enforcement, but I understand the vagueness argument, so we can take that language out so that it's just clear. If you fly into somebody's backyard, it's a trespass unless you're doing it for a commercial or governmental purpose. And so that's why I'm proposing the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Further discussion on the amendment. Representative Chesky.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the initial insertion on line 12. I do not appreciate the deletion of the language on lines 15, 16, and onto page 2. Because I do think that does protect people, and that's what it was put in for. I agree that it does protect people, and I think the standard for liability here needs to be higher than the standard for a trespass. There is another section of Wyoming statute, which I quoted on Wednesday, that provides for civil liability, which has a lower standard. This reduces that to the civil standard, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think that's going to create more prosecutions, and I don't think that's a good thing. I think we need to protect. There's so many ways that this, if you delete that language, there's so many more ways that somebody could inadvertently violate the statute without any intention and be prosecuted because we've taken out the limiting language. So I am very much opposed to the second part of your amendment.
Representative Craig, let's go through your verbiage one more time, make sure that the secretary has it correct.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Line 12, page 1, add at the beginning of the sentence a clause that says unless the small and unmanned aircraft is being used for a valid commercial or governmental purpose, comma. And then it will go on to say a person is guilty of trespass by small unmanned aircraft. And then on line 14, we would remove the words the immediate reaches of. So remove 4 words, strike those. Line 15, after the word landowner, insert a period. Strike the remainder of line 15, all of line 16, and on page 2, strike through the word land on line 1.
We have that, Debbie? Okay, committee, we all have that amendment clear. All in favor of Representative Craigle's amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, say no.
No.
That amendment has failed. Back on the bill. Debbie, call the roll, please, on House Senate File 34.
Representative Cragel.
Aye.
Representative Chestick.
No.
Representative Haroldson. Representative Jennings. Representative Nemec. Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
No.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
No.
Chairman Washit.
No.
We have a total of 2 ayes and 7 noes.
Okay, that bill is not going to receive a due pass recommendation from House Judiciary. Thank you, everyone, for bearing with us, and thank you for all the very informative testimony on Senate File 34. That takes us to Senate File 25. Everyone in the room wishing to testify on Senate File 25? Anybody online looking for 25? All right, this should go fairly quickly. Committee Senate File 25, a joint interim committee bill worked over the summer. Basically, this my recollection on this is that it requires that our district attorneys, prosecuting attorneys, be a licensed attorney and a member in good standing of the Wyoming State Bar throughout their term of office. That's what the bill does. Any questions or add-ons in that? Discussion on the bill? Motion on the bill. Representative Neve.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a question. The deputy county attorneys they would fall into this also, correct? Or is it just for the elected official? Thank you.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Given that it's under 9-1-802 with election, it would fall only that elected.
Representative Cragel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a little follow-up on that. What we're trying to do is make it match the county attorney election provision. And because this one didn't have that requirement in there, obviously, all the deputies are going to have that so that they can practice within the bar. But this was just to make it match the county attorney.
Further discussion? Any amendments? Debbie, you want to call the roll on Senate File 25?
Representative Cragel.
Aye.
Representative Chestick.
Aye.
Representative Haroldson.
Excused.
Representative Jennings. Representative Nemec.
Aye.
Representative Oakley.
Aye.
Representative Provenza.
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams.
Aye.
And Chairman Washit.
Aye.
7 ayes, 1 excused, and 1 no.
And with that, Senate File 25 is passed House Judiciary. And bringing us to our last bill of the morning, Senate File 31, Senate File 31, adjacent land resource data trespass repeal. Again, this is a joint judiciary interim bill. What this stems from is a law that was passed several years ago. It was litigated, and a piece of that law was ruled to be unconstitutional, I believe, by the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, if I remember the testimony correctly. And what this bill does is simply remove that piece that was ruled to be unconstitutional from the Green Books. Anybody have anything to add to that summary? Anybody in the room wishing to testify on Senate File 31? Open public comment. Anybody in Zoom world on Senate File 31? Discussion on 31? Representative Jennings?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to hear a little bit more of the backstory to this, the real life application to this. Why are we striking this? I understand the courts didn't like this particular part, but I'd like to hear what that actually looks like in real life.
What it actually looks like in real life is that no one can enforce this provision within the existing statute. And so the desire is to have our Green Books match up with the case law so that anyone reading 4027-101 in the Green Books would get an accurate representation of what the law allows. Any further discussion? Senate File 31? Hearing none. Debbie, you want to call the roll on Senate File 31?
Aye.
Representative
Debbie,
Chesky.
hang on one second. We need to move the bill first.
Move the bill.
Representative Craig will move second. Provenza. Now we'll call the roll.
I'll start over again. Representative Cragel,
Aye.
Representative Chestick,
Aye.
Representative Haroldson, Representative Jennings, Representative Nemec,
Aye.
Representative Oakley,
Aye.
Representative Provenza,
Aye.
Representative Rodriguez Williams,
Aye.
Chairman Washut.
Aye.
We have 7 ayes and 2 noes.
Thank you. As for Senate File 25, someone on the committee wish to present that on the floor, please. 25. Going to make me assign it. Representative Provenza will take 25. And for Senate File 31, we'll take that on the floor. Representative Chestick. With that, committee will stand in recess till our next meeting on Monday.